After running outside too.
Oh. All right.
All right, hit the lives.
1 second. All right.
You ready to go?
Yes, we are.
Episode 15, literally rolling up my sleeves here. Um, been on a hiatus. Chef Stephan left him uh, solo for a couple of weeks, traveling around a small circle of Louisville, Kentucky, Lake Charles, Louisiana, then to DC, and finally back home in my seat. So I have to say on episode 15, I'm welcoming myself back, to Roots, Heart,
And so,
and so,
yes,
you know,
welcome to Roots, Heart, and Soul. Today is Tuesday, November 26th, right before Thanksgiving. And we have the iconic, I'm going to use that word.
great word,
Uh,
great word.
I'm going to use that word. The iconic Tony Tipton with us tonight. Tony, welcome to Roots, Heart, and Soul. Thank you for joining us. We are so happy we were able to reschedule to have you back. So, welcome, welcome.
Well, thank
Todd?
you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here with you. But I said earlier, I must love me some Todd.
I know
Well,
2 days before
well,
Because
Thanksgiving.
it's 2 days
Hey,
before Thanksgiving.
and,
yeah.
and the funny story is, I'm not even surprised because this guy has so much pull with some very important people in our community. So, hands up.
I don't know if it's necessarily pool. It's just that one favor, washes another favor.
That's right. I
You
was
know,
just sitting here thinking, how much do I owe Todd?
we.
Probably a
I mean, we
lot.
do it for each other.
Yeah.
So that's what makes life great, especially in this community of food, beverage, hospitality, and of course cookbooks and things like that. Stefan, go ahead, run the bio. You
Wow.
know. we need we need some good background music when
Yes,
we edit
yes,
this
yes.
because
Get
this
us
bio,
started.
you
Get us
know,
started with some good music,
all right,
please.
yeah,
A little bit of jazz, a little bit of funk,
all right,
something good.
calypso too, Oh, don't get us started. We'll go on a tangent about music. Go ahead, Stefan, run it down for us.
Miss Tony Tipton Martin is the in chief of Cook's Country Magazine. Tony is the author of several important cookbooks that celebrates African American cookbook history. She is a James Beard Award author of the beautiful book Jubilee, which I've read, Juke Joints, Jazz Club and Juice, and the Jemima Code. She has just written uh, an amazing cookbook, guided this project and team with her vast knowledge of Southern women's food history and her journalistic approach to sharing the stories behind America's favorite dishes. The book is called When Southern Women Cooks. Amazing. Miss Tony Tipton, welcome to Roots, Heart, and Soul. We are excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Let's get with it.
And let's get with it. So we go back, and everything when you had this summit of professionals, that's really I'm going to not even say the words professionals. I'm saying a summit of family, and ancestral talks about food, which we all needed at that time. And quite honestly, as things have gone awry, this a couple of weeks ago in November, we might need another summit, a weekly summit, a cleansing, revival, you know. We got to bring real wine back into the church. None of that fruit juice that they send, for communion. But we met, but we met then, and it was amazing to understand that you are a visionary, that I don't think that people really understand or grasp the volume of what you write, but it also talks about the past, but you give us a vision of the way things should be moving forward. So that's what I take from just our first meeting. But secondly, most importantly, you still hitting grand slams after grand slams after grand slams, like the measurement of, I mean, there's some high cotton, in this
Listen,
standard,
three times James Beard Award winner, multiple books, the Julia Childs Foundation Award, which is given to an individual who has made a profound and significant difference in the way America cooks. That is some serious influence here.
But you know what's really important to share is the consistent theme that runs across all of that. It doesn't matter whether it's award winning, whether it's been something that I did on the side just for our community in Seoul Summit, or representing the entirety of American cooking, which I do at America's Test Kitchen and Cook's Country through our magazine and our TV show, where I'm now a host. The message that runs through that is that there are people behind every morsel of food that we put in our mouths at one level or another, whether they are the people who grow it, harvest it, prepare it, serve it, and all of those are the people that have been left behind. Todd has mentioned our first meeting, and we joked a little bit about why he's so important to me. And at the time, it was 2014, and I received an award that paid me $5,000. Wow. And I called the handful of professionals that were visible at the time. So it's hard to remember because of the internet and the way that we've been able to group ourselves according to Black women in food, Black chefs, the regional thing that Greg does down in North Carolina. Like, there are all these pockets of excellence for Black people. But back then, there was 15 or 20 of us that were visible and known. Right. And I called them all and said, I don't have but $500, but if I give that to you, will you come so that we can all be visible and demonstrate our excellence in one place? And wow. They all came. And lastly, not just did they come, but I didn't know Todd at the time, and he sent me a message on the side and said, I will organize the chefs for you. There was just, I didn't know about having to need, they were going to need a commercial kitchen and just all the things that they had to have to make the event successful for them. I understood the speaker side, but I didn't think about what it means to be engaged in off-premise catering, and the types of food we were talking about is elegant food, right? So I didn't want any disposables, no aluminum foil. Like, Todd was ringing all my bells, and when we connected over champagne, that was like the bottom line. Like, we knew it was connected at that point.
Got a glass of champagne right now. Go ahead, Stephan.
That's not surprising from Todd at all, because that's who he is as not only as a chef, but as a human being. But what I appreciate is that you wanted to share your success, which is what he does as well. You wanted to share your success with other chefs just like you. And that says a ton of things about the kind of person that you are.
Well, I also came up in this industry pretty much alone, without any mentorship, without any support. So my allies don't always look like us.
Absolutely.
And so when I had the opportunity to bring a disparate group of people together so that the outside as well as the inside community could see how successful we can be, and also for the next generation to say, hey, I can be that. You know, we always hear that you can't be what you can't see. And that was the philosophy that I used to gather them. Was I didn't even give them any real instructions or boundaries. I just said, come, present your best self. So whatever that is, know that there's going to be young people. And again, this is before the internet where somebody can just drop in your, DM and, say, hey,
Right.
hey, how are you? I like you. I want to get to know you. Like this is the only way you could engage with
Correct.
somebody at
Correct.
this level. And so there's a group of young people that have continued to support each other from that gathering, who have gone on to become very successful.
And the reason why I say that is because, um, the way Todd and I met almost over 10 years ago already, um, when he was doing this second book, Roots, Heart, and Soul, he called me on the phone and says, Stephan, I need your help. Uh, get on a plane. And I'm like, okay, what are we doing? And and he says, I'm doing research for this cookbook, and I need your expertise on this project. And I said, okay, I'm on a plane. And next thing you know, to my surprise, he, we had so much fun working on this book. But to my surprise, I found myself in the book.
Yeah.
And one of the things that and this is why this is such a beautiful story that you're sharing, is because you don't have, see, a lot of chefs don't understand that sharing the limelight or sharing the success with others doesn't dim your own light. And he does that all the time. So for you at that particular time to be able to call other chefs of color just like you and say, hey, listen, let's come together and let's do this, that speaks volume.
I mean, I think there's things, Stefan, that was even uh, quite uh, mystifying. Is that we all knew that we could all cook. We all knew that we had a voice, uh, but we all didn't know each other in a sense of connectivity, ingredients, spices, um, how we drank the same things, how we lived the same things, when we woke up at the same times. There was all pockets of people moving, and it takes, a matriarch, you know, like Tony, in order to start that whole thing, especially when you look at it from a standpoint when you've been the only one. I mean, the reason why Tony and I can connect is because even in the same culinary or hospitality field, being the only one nominated for the Beard Award. I can't be the only one. Like, I mean, how is it in 2007, 2008, I'm the only one? That makes no sense. And then I see the success of where Mashama comes and all of that stuff. I know the things behind the scenes and in front of the scenes that a person like Tony has done to do so, and then pass the torch, the charge on to myself and pass it on to other people. And that's where it's a requirement, to do that.
It's a
Yeah.
responsibility.
Absolutely. I don't want everyone to think that we just always just do it out of the kindness of our heart, because we do. That's might be the basis, but it's an absolute requirement and it's a responsibility to do so. If not, I can't honor, I can't talk about my grandmother and anyone in my family if I don't push that forward, So,
100. Yeah.
yeah.
So Tony, what, I'm going to go back to the fact that you have done so much to tell the story of African American food culture through your books, which have obviously won the high regards of the James Beard Foundation. But more importantly, besides the award, what does it mean to you to be able to write these books and be able to tell and especially your this beautiful book Jubilee? I'm in love with that book. What does it mean to you to be able to tell this story, those stories?
Yeah, what a great question. Um, so coming up as I did as a journalist, what I realized is that what is written down matters. Even though we always heard that African Americans cooked in the oral tradition and we're not a monolith and like all these cliches that were thrown around, to describe the lack of visibility for us. And we accepted it like propaganda, just like, okay, well, our people didn't write it down, so they only cooked with their soul. So that means that they didn't know scientific cooking. And that did not reflect the women in my world that were intelligent. It didn't and it didn't reflect what I saw in the broader community being a journalist in a mainstream newspaper, when every chef that got interviewed talked about how he was inspired by some woman in his family, right? That he learned at her knee in the kitchen and his observations. And that he was apprenticing with her. Like, so there was a group of words that got used to describe the white learning experience. And I mean, no disrespect to any communities, because everybody knows I can sing pop and soul and R&B and jazz. Like I can speak
Right.
multiple languages. But I do fight the revolution with my words. And it became clear to me that when we were being described in writing, it was always dumbed down somehow. And so I knew I needed some piece of evidence to refute that, because it just couldn't be my word. It just couldn't be, I couldn't even gather a bunch of Black scholars to say Black cooking is important, because that's not the way that the system worked. Right. So if you want to fight within the system, you got to understand the system.
Okay.
And I knew that words were what could change things. And that's why I used cookbooks, because they were written evidence of what Black people had to say about themselves. And for a long time, our writings in those early days were dismissed as writing about the food we cooked for white people.
Mm.
And so I'm just, like I hear all these these cliches and mythologies while I'm maturing as a writer, and I don't know that I'm storing them in my heart and my soul. I just know they just are clashing what I know to be true, that someone who's cooking with their senses is weighing the amount of salt when she puts it in her hand. She just has muscle memory, and her hand can tell you, that's a teaspoon, even if she doesn't say it's a teaspoon, right? If you want to know it's a teaspoon, grab it out of her hand and put it in a measuring tool and check.
Right.
But she knows how much salt it takes to season that pot of beans. Or when she says, I'm going to, oh, baby, I just put on a pot of beans. No, you didn't.
Wow.
You made a stock. You took a bone and some aromatic vegetables and you simmered it in water until you got this potent elixir that you use to flavor your vegetables and your greens and your meats and your beans and so the world just didn't make any sense to me. And I knew that if I was going to change anything, I had to have evidence, and cookbooks were the thing that gave me the evidence of what Black people had to say about themselves when they were given the chance.
I mean that one, I mean, I have like 5,000 questions, but I got to narrow it down for the podcast. One thing that you said though about measuring in the hand, and broadly, it might look as if they might say, okay, well, it's just her hand. But if they actually measure it, will they get down to the grain, the actual grain to say that, you know, how, they get so scientific when it comes outside of just that hand that I think it also kind of backwards diminishes the quantitative muscle memory that you're talking about. But my question is there a different responsibility being a journalist versus a cookbook author that you kind of have to separate the two, or do they kind of run in the same way when you do the research for the information that you're providing?
Oh, no, I think they're very different. And that ties back to my earlier comments about wanting diversity at Soul Summit. For a long time, people referred to me as, graciously, but they referred to me as chef, right? And I'm not a chef. I understand a chef to be a highly proficient, trained individual that understands the kitchen brigade system and lots of things. I can't cook. But
Yes,
I'm not a chef.
I just want to let everybody know that I can verify that Tony can cook. So
Yeah,
she's
Oh,
so
not she's not
I bet,
saying
but I'm
it
not,
I
but
bet
I'm
she
specifically,
can.
yeah, but I'm not, but I'm not a
right.
chef, and
Okay.
I wanted people to understand that scholarly writing serves a purpose, but scholars can talk kind of in an echo chamber, like where they validate each other's scientific findings, and then it's so intelligent that it doesn't sometimes get outside of academia and the ivory tower. And then on the other hand, you had cookbook writers who were writing in the first person, and it was just their one unique experience, but there wasn't anybody standing for the culture as a whole, trying to say, okay, I'm aware we're not a monolith, we're not all the same, but let's just talk about a group of individuals that fit into a particular kind of profile. This, in my view, became professionals. They were people that had a degree of training, who were able to work with a higher quality of ingredients, and who understood technique and method and transferred their knowledge to someone who wrote it down for them, published it for them, like however it got to paper, all the way back to 1866. They always had those things in common. They functioned differently than a soul cook. So I want to be respectful, especially with the name of this podcast and both of Todd's books. Everyone who knows me knows I mean no disparagement to soul, but we can't be defined only by soul. Plus, we don't have a clear definition of what cooking with the soul is. Right? Cooking with the soul is what we're talking about right now. That
Absolutely.
it looks like magic when a chef picks up the salt and sprinkles it.
Absolutely.
But you know darn well how much salt that was from your fingertips when you pinched it together in your hand and sprinkled it. You have a general sense of what that was. But it looks like magic to people on the outside. And so giving credit to professionals has always been the priority for me. Lastly, how it relates to Jubilee is that I didn't ever expect Jubilee to be the greatest cookbook ever. There are plenty of amazing recipe books out there that are doing innovative, amazing things. What I wanted to do was set the record straight and say, we did these things too. Now you can adapt from here. You could spring from it. You could sprinkle gold dust on it. You can do whatever you want to. But at baseline, we all, generally speaking, make macaroni and cheese or
No matter what.
greens or, whatever. There's some things that we all just do.
But I think I think you did a great job in making that point with Jubilee. But more than that, I think you elaborated how much the variety of who we are, and I use the variety because we come from so many different places, bring to the table.
Yeah.
And really that's what I discovered in that book. And being from Haiti, that really resonated with me.
Yeah, and the book, I always envisioned that this would be a multi-series book, that it was too much. We have too much history and story to confine to one book. But I couldn't even sell this as a book at all at first. The publishing world had the belief that this was PhD level work that I was talking about. You're talking about changing history. I guess so. But it took some journalistic friends of mine to say journalists win Pulitzer Prizes. So don't go chasing after this PhD situation. Walk in your own truth, live in your lane, and do what you do, and let everyone else, get with it or not. And so I grew very weary of trying to convince people that I was capable. And I had some young friends who said, take it to the internet. And the internet was new then. And to me, that was just like, you think I'm gonna expose all of my content and put it out there for
Right,
somebody
right,
else to just
right.
put their name all over
I
it?
mean,
Yeah, I know.
it's called a blog. I mean,
Right.
we
They
come
said,
up
well,
when
it's
the
called a
blog was
blog.
Yeah.
fashionable.
And I
So
was
we get
just
it.
like,
Yeah.
oh, that's about like getting an Uber, or it's a stranger danger. Like that's just generational stuff. I'm showing my age there. But this young person pulled my chain about it and said, no, 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 no. You can find your tribe that way. You will find the people that want to hear what you have to say and forget the rest of them. And so I did put it up on the internet, and I wrote an introduction that explained this and that. I was going to experiment with it for a year. And if people were interested in it, maybe I would have proven my ability. And if not, I would take my ball and go home. And the University of Texas Press came to me and said, we want to publish that, take it down. And that was the beginning. They said,
Wow.
they said we on two conditions. It has to be a spectacularly beautiful book to break
Mm,
this Jemima code. They got it. They understood that I was saying there were beautiful Black women in the kitchen too. Like
absolutely.
there's just so many stereotypes I wanted to break down. And the second one was they said, and you cannot change the title. We want to go with the Jemima code. And so it took it when lesson number 2 is, even when bad things happen to you, I guess it's number 1 and 2, when bad things happen to you in this industry, and they will, even with people you think you can trust, you have to pick yourself up. Our ancestors did that all along. Dust yourself off and find another way. And that's what I did.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what makes us soulful people, in the terms of what it is that we always find a great way. We're about 28 after the hour, Roots, Heart, Soul podcast on Heritage Radio Network. We're with one of my greatest friends, Tony Tipton Martin, just telling, well, I think we're captivated as hosts, but, also as listeners, in the story that she's saying. The first, 15, 20 minutes we talked about Jubilee, and then Tony just brought up Jemima Code. And what I found so riveting about that book was that what we saw as Aunt Jemima, to me, was still beautiful. And I believe that you showed the parallels of both sides in it, in saying that what you might think is bad, or what you might think is a stereotype, is actually still very delicious, first of all. Secondly, that we are not a monolith. However, monolithic food is still delicious. When you look at things from a standpoint of, let's say, Italian, everyone talks about spaghetti and meatballs and pizza, you know, then, well, that's all they cook. Okay, it's still delicious, and, we still all go to it. But really, the emphasis with Jemima Cole, I want the listeners to understand from your own speaking was what? I mean, we understand Jubilee and celebration, but what was Jemima Cole really, telling the world about parts of the culture that should be celebrated in a way that maybe the world was not ready for at that time?
I love that last part of the question, because that is why there was a Jemima Code book. We knew that the world wasn't ready. We just have to go back to 2015, 2010, and just stay in context for that time period and realize there just weren't a lot of Black books or Black visible chefs. Like, all of this is all new. And if you're going to change people's minds, you have to speak in a language they understand. There's no point in speaking a foreign language to someone just because you can or you want to. If you want to be heard, you have to speak so they can hear you. And so I knew that I needed to first get people's attention. So the Jemima Code was created to set out the code. What are the stereotypes that we have all lived with? When we look at that picture on the cover of that book, and I used to open my talks this way. Well, just before there was a book, I would just open the talk with that slide, the slide of the cover. And I would say, I want you to just be quiet for a minute and look at this picture. And each one of you realize you are having a different perception and a different reaction to her than the person next to you. But at baseline, she is the same person. Y'all all have a different attitude about who she is, but she is the same person. And what I set out to do was say that by the end of the book, when you get to the end of the book, what you will understand is that we all had a different relationship with Black women in the kitchen. And society used all those different relationships, all those different qualities, all those different competencies, and rolled them all up into this one Mammy Aunt Jemima figure who, could do everything. She was a superhero.
Absolutely.
Or she was, she was degraded. Because that's just the way the world is, right? You build up and you tear down, you build up and you tear down. So the reason there's no recipes in that book is because I knew that was going to be such a surprising method or message for people to hear, that Black people had been trained. We're still just learning about James Hemings back then. Right. Now he's a household word. There were people who did not know who Edna Lewis was back then. And now we act like she's the totem for all of Black cooking, as if there were no other Black women. And I love and respect her more than almost anybody. But enough, like, it's okay. Let's spread it around and learn about some other women too. And so I knew that book could only do one thing. It just had to be the introduction. And people questioned why there were no recipes in it. And the recipes that are there are very strategic. They are contradictions to everything you think about. There's guacamole, there's avocado, there's granola. Like, there are these things that Black people said they made, and they were taking back their agency over their food. And I'll end with this. If somebody asks you guys as chefs, what do you cook at home versus what you cook at work? Is only the food you cook at home, your food, and what you cook at work belongs to somebody else? No, it's all your food. And if you asked any professional chef, any of the celebrities we know, anybody that cooks on TV, they're known for the food they cooked at work. And I spent months talking about the difference being that Southern and soul food, the foods of survival, certainly are the foods that required an intelligence for working with inferior ingredients and things they made at home during migration, like all that. But I want to talk about what they do at work. So the through line for all my work is all going to be always What are people doing at work? Juke Joints is about people working at the bar. The next book is about confectioners and bakers. And When Southern Women Cook is about Southern women. But they're all the same. It's all marginalized people who didn't have a voice, who have been treated as if being a home cook wasn't being a smart cook.
Stefan, I'll let you jump in, but I just want to let the
Before,
record show is that we are the one responsible for $6.75 oxtails right now. So you can blame us on on those chefs
Isn't that the truth? Now we
you
can't
know
afford the food that is our food.
and chillings and hog
before,
head cheese is all on us. Go ahead, Stefan.
this conversation reminds me of probably the very first dish I learned from my paternal grandmother. She would make this. She would take some of the most common, cheap ingredients and would make this amazing tuna casserole that still today leaves this this taste in my mouth. Not only was it good, I mean, I could even today I will make a, a batch of it and I'll eat it for the whole week. So, but what I love the most is the the emotion, love, and passion I saw in her making cooking for us or making that dish. And that's that has left me with memories that of my childhood that will forever I will take with me forever. But before we get into your new book, When Southern Women Cook, I have I wouldn't call it political question, but I have a very weird question to ask. For the amount of amazing talent we have in our black and brown community, writers, journalists, obviously you're on the mountaintop, Tony, editor of a magazine. You're on America's Test Kitchen. I see more and more in my research because since I started this podcast, that's I do a lot of that. I look for people who are making an impact in this food and beverage world of ours. People that look like us, and I'm discovering some of the most amazing people, women who today who are heading magazines like Bon Appetit, and others, but yet very few of us are still being being talked about, being showcased. Our recipes not not being featured in these magazines. Um, why do you think that is, and what needs to happen? And believe me, we've done a lot of progress. 2024, um, more black and brown chefs are winning James Beard awards. More black and brown, black journalists and black writers and black storytellers are winning James Beard award. But still,
But Stefan, let me jump in. Let me ask you, and let me ask it in a different way because I think we're going to ask the same question. So, is there black fatigue? I mean, is there fatigue happening right now? With the celebration, the winners and all that stuff that's moving forward. So maybe it's a two-part question, but I think one, he's asking where are we still not there yet, and then for those who have made it there at some period of time, is there some fatigue going on as well?
It's a tough question because I can't speak on behalf of the gatekeepers.
Absolutely.
And so the way you frame that question really is its own answer. We know that for every bit of progress we make, there's a backlash. We had a Black president, and then we had backlash, right? And so when Black people demonstrate some level of agency, it can be tokenized, it can be marginalized, it can say that it doesn't fit into the scope of the way things go. Like, all of those are words and things that I don't get to participate in. But what I can tell you, as a person walking on that other side, as a gatekeeper, I can tell you something that's been hard to try to get the next generation to hear, because it can read like I wanted to slam the window behind me, or that I don't understand there's a new way. And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story in short. When Michael Twitty first came on board, he and I were together at an event, and I was old school and he was the new. And I took him to the side and I said, baby. And he would say, if he was standing right here, and this is a radio interview, so I'm not saying anything that I'm ashamed of. I said, oh, baby, nobody ready for this. You're going to have to tone that down. And he said, no, Mama, I really respect you, but I'm going to go my way.
Yeah.
And so he set a course for people expressing their independence and their individuality. And it was, like you said, Todd, it was very well received. People wanted to hear, they were hungry for Black stories, because being the community we are, we can also be closed. So for me, as the editor of a legacy brand, what I can say is I'm not running a blog with a tribe and a unique, narrow set of super fans. Well, I am running all of that, but those super fans are accustomed to ingredients that are accessible, to methodologies that are not so complicated, that don't become projects, right? That can all sound like gatekeeping. It can sound like, well, you just don't respect that making oxtails isn't something you can just throw on the grill and be done in 20 minutes. That is all true. But when you have a responsibility to a mass audience, you have to find the most universal way to deliver your message. So back to Jubilee, that's why I didn't think Black people were going to respect it. I really didn't think anybody would respect Jubilee, because it wasn't soul enough. It was. And then is there too white? Like, you always get that. Where's your Black card? Where's the white? Why is it so white? Why is it that there's always that question? And I think about.
But I think collectively, all three of us on here, and probably most of our listeners, and our friends, and have always, done that. When Dwayne and I, ran the Oak Room, 7-course, 12-course, 21-course tasting menu, people was like, your salmon is, you serve salmon raw. Well, I mean, what do you mean? Like, Black people don't serve salmon raw. Well, first of all, Dwayne, he grew up in Seattle, Washington, so, in a Black community in Seattle, Washington. So he got the freshest salmon. You're damn right he served it raw. He ate it raw, and things like that,
I remember one time I was running a kitchen right across from in downtown Brooklyn, right across from BAM, the theater.
Oh yeah.
Haitian restaurant. And we would get a slew of variety of different customers come in and enjoy our cuisine. And one night I have a young Haitian couple, who comes in, sits down, and they saw me walking by. They said, "Chef, can we talk to you?" I said, "Sure." I said, and they said to me, "We love your food, but it doesn't taste like my mama's."
Okay. Well, tell us, give us, $350,000
and my response was, "But I'm not your mama."
Right.
Absolutely.
I'm a professional chef who has to cater to a variety of different palates. I cannot be cooking just for you. You
Right.
need to understand that the way your mother cooks, she is cooking from what she knows, how she knows, and she's cooking for you. I'm not just cooking for you.
Right.
Mm.
So
Right.
Mm.
as long as my food, if my food can make you remember your mother, I've done my job.
No. Oh wow,
But
Mm.
it's
that's a good
never going
point.
to taste like your mother's.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a responsibility now going forward to think about how we stay relevant given this potential fatigue that Todd mentioned, right? Has the industry moved on to another community, like, or whatever the potential question could be? What does it take to be relevant? Juke Joints did not win the coveted James Beard Award this year, but it won the Tales of the Cocktail
Absolutely,
Award.
it did. Yeah.
And so that was perhaps even more meaningful to me because those are people that have an identity, they have a brand, they have an authority and a level of professionalism. And they said there's room for the way you tell a story about the bar too. Right. They embraced that I wasn't trying to be any of them. I wasn't trying to take from Tiffany or anybody else. I just wanted to make sure that they get the props that they deserve. And so we can only do what is authentic to our brand, right? And if the industry buys it, they buy it. And if at the end of the day they don't, then everybody has to do what I did, which is take it to the internet or whatever the source is. I think there's a lot more opportunity now. There are publishers that are more niche, that are
Mhm.
putting out books that are where people expect to see a niche topic. Whereas, maybe one of the bigger houses, you have to be more neutral. This is not new. I'm working on a piece about Edna Lewis. And, when she got started, we praise her now, but the criticism was she was too wordy. That
Mm.
all that storytelling she wanted to talk about was extra. Let's just get to the quantities, right? And she wanted to talk about free range chicken and cooking with fresh herbs and out of the garden and all of that stuff that has renewed everybody's understanding of Southern food as the original farm to table cooking. That's what she gave back to America, was respect for the South, more in a lot of other things too. But she wasn't always appreciated the way she is today.
That it's such an interesting point because I don't know if people still are people have grasped the brevity of the South in terms of terroir and ingredients, because everything's just so readily available to everyone, and I believe that delicious food has to be rediscovered in our country. I don't think that everyone has the opportunity. First, we talk about food deserts and things like that. Secondly, two parent households are becoming a less part of American fabric, and then the availability of ingredients, is going to be even more challenging moving forward. How do we make sure that not only the Edna Lewis story is continuing to be told, but also the Tony Tipton Martin story is to be told, in the sense that there's a generational story of the past that you are telling for the future, probably 100 years from now, where scholarly they're going to look back and say, "Oh, we missed this, or we embraced it," you know. But there's so much of the future of the world food that you understanding right now that we have to qualify.
Well, so there's a lot to unpack in that question.
I
Um,
know,
so I'm
I,
gonna answer. I'm gonna do
right.
what sometimes people in interviews do, which is say whatever it is they want to talk about.
Okay. It's nothing better than that. And quite honestly, you have the
No, no.
gravitas to sell. You
Let
know,
me
so
try to make it. Let me try to make a
okay,
point in my John Edgerton
okay,
way.
okay.
When I went to work for America's Test Kitchen, I'm sure it surprised a lot of people because it is not known as a place with any diversity, and the process of erasure, intentional or not, as part of the process of making something available to the broadest number of people means you, even with all of that recipe development and efficiency and all the stuff we build into making a recipe perfect, somebody gets lost.
Mm,
And we could waste a lot of time talking about appropriation and theft, and like that's all out there for somebody else to discuss. That's not my game. I'd rather stick to just the facts because that's what journalists do.
okay,
And the fact is that through that erasure, women, after I scrape off Black people, women are also lost.
mm,
And with the events of the recent past in politics, we have forgotten that we are a nation of immigrants.
mm,
There's only one group of people that this country belonged to. And I used to be very quiet about talking about that in the very beginning. Um, but you mentioned Italians earlier, Germans, Polish, Spanish, British. Everyone who comes here has a hyphenated name.
mm.
British American, German American, African American, Mexican American. We shorten it, right? And those people we all came with our own unique food ways and methods and techniques and understanding of how to put together food. Now, if you speak about the Italians, but do they cook like what you find in a can of Chef Boyardee? No, but they made that food so that it was accessible to the most people that would come
Absolutely.
through the door of their restaurant. But does it absolutely reflect what happens in Italy? No,
Not at all.
not at all. So I've been listening to people on this new tour asking me questions about why there's so many diverse women in this book.
Mm. Oh, wow. Wow.
So you're talking mostly about the global South as a modern experience, right? And I'm like, no, that was the goal for me, helping to train up and mentor the editor that worked on this book, who is an amazing recipe developer. But she realized she had not ever been focused on the people whose recipes she was changing as part of her job.
Mm.
And so with Jubilee as the model, she took all the recipes that were related to the South in our archives, and she stripped them down to, the most iconic ones and the ones that had a woman connection to them. And then we set about to tell the story of those women in the exact same way. So you learn about the woman who is responsible for the red wax drip on a Maker's Mark bottle
Absolutely.
because her husband had, he was a distiller and she wanted his product to stand out. So she talked him into this red drip. We've got stories about shrimpers and women rum runners, and it's the same exact methodology. It says there's not just one group of people that make up America. And all these different communities have always been here, have always contributed, and if we don't recognize our humanity and our shared experience, we're going to dive. And food is such a marvelous way to exchange. The book opens with hoe cakes. And think about a hoe cake. It's water and cornmeal. It starts with the indigenous, and everybody can add to it. You can make hot water cornbread, you can make cornbread, you can add sugar or not, you can add eggs and make it a souffle, so it's spoon bread. You can make it into dumplings and put it on your collard greens. There's all these things that you can do that make this set of just two ingredients unique to just your community. And so we're using When Southern Women Cook, as I have used all my work, as a way to bring people together and to experience our humanity, and all of the politics and whether we get treated like tokens and like all that other stuff, it breaks my heart. And sometimes I just have to step away from social experiences because I think differently.
Because women are at the base, in my opinion, of this cooking thing. Because
Did we lose Stephan? We might have.
He's frozen.
He's frozen.
The only time I saw a man in the kitchen
Oh, there he is.
was when my grandfather would take his leg of pork, and he would go in the back of the house for Christmas, and that's when he would braise this leg of pork for hours. But never would you see him in the kitchen otherwise. My grandmother, my aunties were the ones that were in my whole experience. So when you define Southern cooking, because we Todd just had.
I mean, you asking Tony to divine Southern cooking with,
No.
2 minutes left. With 2 minutes left of us closing out.
No, because you had that conversation at the Behavior Food Festival. So when you define Southern cooking,
right?
How, if you were to break it down in 3 words or in 4 or 5 words, how would that go?
Oh wow! I mean, hell, I can't break it down. Okay, all right, Tony.
It's a state of mind with a set of ingredients within a certain boundary.
It's a state of mind with a set of ingredients in a certain boundary. I just want to make sure I heard
territorial boundary. So you can go
boundary.
as far north as the Mason-Dixon line. You can go as far west as the middle of Texas, because everyone thinks the South ends in Houston. But there is evidence that Austin is the physical geographic end of the South, because it becomes the hill country and rocky after that. So, okay, so now in Florida. So you have a boundary. Then you have a type of ingredient that grows within that. There's all kinds of other things we heard when we were doing the research for this. It's where the kudzu grows. I mean, you can make those kinds of definitions, but in terms of foodways, it's based on the ingredients. And I don't think it's any different than saying New England cooking or Northwestern or California. All foods are defined by the terroir and the ingredients you find within the boundaries.
I mean, we look at barbecue, as a preference, for that, where it's, mustard base, vinegar base, and things like that.
Now within that boundary, would you be able to break it down into cultural influences?
I haven't thought about that hard. I haven't thought about that to be articulate enough.
Within the research that you've done for this book and how you developed this book.
Well, think about this. Soul food became a thing when people took Southern food out of the South. So the migrants who left were agriculturally based. And they were accustomed to the freshest garden vegetables, cornmeal ground right there in their communities, which meant it had a certain type of sweetness to it. When they move into the North and they're concentrated in these environments so that they can do factory work, they're getting inferior food, but they're still trying to replicate what they experienced as agricultural people. So soul is a sort of this overly sweet, overly salty, overly fat situation, trying to recreate what was naturally just better food for you. And I would love to end on the fact that 10 of the most healthy foods you can eat are part of the Black diaspora. Watermelon,
Yep.
dark leafy greens, whole grains, meaning cornmeal, a low meat, heavily plant-based diet, and there's 10 of them. And that's what should define who we are.
I mean, you talk about the migration and the sweetness of things, and when you get to Chicago and I come back to the South, there's the debate of sugar on grits, and things like that, which probably will be a whole episode, by itself. Stephan, go ahead and wrap us up right quick, my
So
friend.
before we close, Tony, I cannot tell you how amazing this conversation has been. We have to bring her back, Todd. There's no doubt about it. Tony, where can our audience, how do they follow you? What is next for you? Where are you going next? Where can they connect with you as you do this tour for this amazing book, When Southern Women Cook?
Thank you so much for inviting me, chefs. This was really deep and fun at the same time. I don't often get to have this level of conversation, so I really, really appreciate being here with you. We have a couple of weeks left on the When Southern Women Cook tour. We will be in, I'll be in Charleston and Atlanta to wrap up, and you can find all information about me at just my name, TonyTiptonMartin.com, or at Gmail, or any of the social media sites, just by my name.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been such an amazing conversation. And of course, so happy that my good buddy, my brother, is back with us.
He's back. Yeah.
He's back after such a grueling couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Please follow us on Roots, Heart, and Soul podcast. Subscribe, share, support us. And of course, we are on Heritage Radio Network .org, so you can find us there as well. And all of the podcast channels like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This has been a wonderful Tuesday night. I bid you good night. Tony, thank you again for being with us. My brother, Chef Todd, your last words?
I say, my friend, happy Thanksgiving to all. You're listening to Roots, Heart, Soul on Heritage Radio Network.